Canada just pulled off a move that left Trump celebrating far too early. The US celebrated what looked like a major win, but one hidden detail could turn that victory into a painful mistake. Carney hinted at it with just one word, and that word changes everything. A deal has been struck on the Gordie Howe International Bridge. Trump is on Truth Social declaring a historic victory. The American media is running the story as a straightforward case of Washington squeezing Ottawa until Canada folded. But there's a single word buried in the July 11th agreement that makes the entire celebration absurd, and that word is net. Mark Carney stood at a podium in Calgary and practically winked at the cameras when he said it. The word net does a lot of the work on this. He wasn't being modest. He was describing a mathematical trap that the Trump administration walked directly into while thinking they had won the lottery. To understand what actually happened, you need to understand the difference between gross revenue and net profit. When a truck pays a toll at the Gordie Howe Bridge, that cash does not flow immediately into a bucket that gets split 50-50 between Canada and the United States. That is not how a $6.4 billion infrastructure project works. That is not how any infrastructure project works. The money flows through a legally binding financial waterfall, a structure with strict, non-negotiable tiers that must be exhausted before a single dollar is ever classified as profit. The first tier of that waterfall is baseline operations, keeping the lights on, paying toll operators, clearing snow, securing the plaza. That comes off the top of every dollar collected before anything else happens. The second tier, and this is the one that makes the 50% split effectively meaningless for decades, is debt servicing. Canada fronted 100% of the $6.4 billion required to build the bridge. The toll revenue must reimburse the Canadian Treasury for both the principal and the carrying costs before the calculation ever moves further down the chain. The third tier net profit is whatever survives the vacuum created by the first two. Under projections based on the 2012 foundational agreement, it is estimated to take 50 years to fully recoup the $6.4 billion construction principal. The new agreement caps the profit split at 15 years. Trump secured 50% of 15 years inside a 50-year mortgage. He got a participation ribbon and called it a championship trophy. The Trump administration needed a win for the news cycle. They needed something they could run on Fox News, something they could post on Truth Social, something that let them tell the base that Washington had forced a weak partner into submission. Canada gave them exactly that, a beautifully wrapped gift box containing 50% of zero, and let them brag about it while the Gordie Howe Bridge opened on July 20. 7th, the blockade ended. The working class on both sides of the border got the crossing they had been waiting for, and Canada kept a century of infrastructure. The corporate structure Canada built around this entire project is called DBFOM, Design, Build, Finance, Operate, Maintain. In plain language, Canada hired a private consortium to build and run the bridge, but Canada kept control of the financial architecture. The private firm receives a fixed availability payment, essentially a flat management salary, regardless of how many trucks cross on any given day. This means the profit calculation is entirely in Canada's hands, structured by Canadian engineers and Canadian financial advisors who built the waterfall specifically to ensure that net profit, as a legally defined category, would not materialize for the American side during the 15-year window of the new agreement. The US administration also celebrated the veto right on any toll increase over 10%. The Trump camp paraded this around as proof of American dominance over the bridge's commercial operations. In practice, no government raises tolls 10% on a major international trade corridor without triggering immediate economic consequences on its own supply chain. Canada conceded a regulatory right it was never going to exercise, and in exchange, the Trump administration felt like they were sitting in the driver's seat of a vehicle that Ottawa owns outright. The real target the Gordie Howe Bridge was built to eliminate was never the Trump administration. It was the Morin family, the private billionaire dynasty that has owned the Ambassador Bridge since 1979. One family privately controlling the most vital international trade artery on the continent for nearly half a century. They did not maintain the infrastructure. They extracted maximum tolls from truck drivers with no alternative crossing. They bought up surrounding neighborhoods on both sides of the Detroit River and let them deteriorate. And when Gordie Howe was built to end that monopoly, they deployed their political resources directly. Federal records show Matthew Maroon contributed $1 million to a pro-Trump political action committee. Hours before Trump posted on Truth Social, threatening to block the new bridge's opening, Maroon reportedly held a closed-door meeting with the U.S. Commerce Secretary. The Trump administration then delayed a $6.4 billion public bridge to protect a privately owned crossing where a billionaire was charging truckers $20 to sit in traffic. Long-haul truckers absorbed that delay in lost wages. Any trucker will confirm that if the wheels are not turning, money is not being made. Auto workers on both sides of the border dealt with delayed supply chains. Canadian medical workers who commute from Windsor to Detroit area hospitals faced extended crossing times. The human cost of the manufactured delay landed entirely on working people on both sides of the border so that one family could extend its toll monopoly by a few additional weeks. The moment the Gordie Howe opens on July 27th, that monopoly ends. No truck driver with a delivery deadline is going to choose a 4-lane, century-old private bridge charging $100+ per crossing, when a 6-lane, direct highway-to-highway public crossing is operating next to it at $60. The Moron family spent millions attempting to purchase a permanent monopoly. The Canadian government handed working-class truck drivers on both sides of the border the commercial alternative that makes that monopoly irrelevant. The philosophical divergence this entire episode exposed is between two entirely different approaches to power. One approach is transactional, reactive, and optimized for the next news cycle. It measures success by whether a headline can be generated before tomorrow morning. It needs a visible trophy, a chest thump moment, a press release that the base can celebrate. It is highly effective at generating the appearance of winning. It is structurally incapable of managing infrastructure amortization schedules that run across 50 years. The other approach is patient, clinical, and anchored in generational timelines. It does not require a trophy. It requires the ledger to eventually read correctly, and in the ledger of the Gordie Howe Bridge, the number that matters is not 50% of net profit over 15 years. It is the $6.4 billion asset that Canada financed, built, controls, and will operate across the next century of North American trade. Canada did not lose this negotiation. Canada paid a nominal toll, 50%, of a profit category that will not exist in any meaningful form for decades to open a bridge that permanently ends a private monopoly on the most important bilateral trade corridor in North America. Sometimes the most effective way to win is to hand your opponent a victory that exists entirely on paper while you secure the physical infrastructure underneath it.